Hey guys, what's going on? Abyssal Wave here, and today I'm really excited to bring you guys the video talking about all the changes for Frost DKs in patch 7.3. Of course, I can't really do this video for Unholy DKs because there's almost nothing changing for them. There's nothing on the patch notes. However, they are getting a slight damage increase, but I can't really do a whole video on that. But without further ado, let's get into the Frost DK 7.3 changes, which are occurring on August 29th. So the first and biggest change is, of course, well, not the biggest change, it's definitely up there, and that's all damage increase for Frost DKs by 14%. Well needed because a lot of things are changing for Frost DKs. Breath of Sindragosa is definitely going to be rotating out as the dominant build for the spec because it has dominated the spec for the last 9 months. It has been the go-to build, and it's really nice to see them switching things up. But if Breath of Sindragosa is going away as a super strong build, they're going to need to compensate, and 14% damage is what they thought would be a good compensation. So next up, we have, of course, the talent changes. So on the left, I'm going to put up the old talent tree, or the one that we're currently using right now. And then on the right side, I'm going to put up what the talent tree is going to be looking like on August 29th when 7.3 drops. It's a huge change. A lot of talents are moving. The biggest change is, of course, Hungering Rune Weapon is moving to the 100 row, replacing Glacial Advance, which is now going to be down on the level 58 row. So I'm not going to go over like what's going where, but you can kind of get a feel for what's changing with how talents are moving around, and it's definitely making way for new builds to come to light, and that's really what Frost needs. Frost has had a cookie cutter build for way too long. I'm really excited to see some other builds come in. Of course, Obliteration was previously the first build for Frost in the expansion, and Glacial Advance was still definitely viable, but they have just taken away side to Breath of Sindragosa, so it's kind of cool to see Obliteration come back, of course, because it's been not viable for a long time, and Hungering Rune Weapon is going to have its own little build. So let's get into the changes for the actual 100 talents themselves. So the first one, Breath of Sindragosa, is getting a slight damage increase, 10%. The reason it's getting a damage increase is because it's not going to have Hungering Rune Weapon as a synergy talent anymore, and that's really where Breath got a lot of its damage, able to have just these long periods of Breath of Sindragosa. At minimum, you would have 30 seconds. If you played awful, you would have 30 seconds because that talent was so strong and gave you so many resources. So increasing the damage of Breath and increasing all damage in total is just going to make smaller Breath of Sindragosa burst phases, but stronger burst phases, which is a good compensation because having longer breath phases does get annoying after a while. Having short burst windows is a little bit easier to manage. And next, of course, with Hungering Rune Weapon moving to its own tier in the level 100, well, not its own tier, but moving to the 100 tier and having builds built around it, it is getting a slight duration reduce. So it is going to be 12 seconds as opposed to 15 seconds. However, it is also going to grant us 20% haste. So that's a lot of haste, and it does grant you that haste for, of course, the 12 seconds, which is pretty nice. It's still going to give you a ton of resources, and with that additional haste, there's still, of course, going to be moments where you completely overcap on runic power, and you're really going to be overcapping a lot on runic power with how Hungering Rune Weapon works if you decide to use that build. And I'm kind of thinking in my head what builds would revolve around this, but we'll see when it actually comes to light. And next up, of course, is Obliteration getting huge buffs. So the first buff is it's getting an extra 2 seconds. So right now it's 8 seconds. It's going to be buffed to 10 seconds. And also, one big problem with Obliteration was you would overwrite a lot of rhyme procs. What would happen is you would go Frost Strike Obliterate, and you just do that over and over and save the rhyme procs for the end when Obliteration is over. So you wouldn't overcap on... well, not overcap, but so you wouldn't waste a GCD on Rhyme when it was way better spent put into Frost Strike Obliterate. Well, now what they're doing is Howling Blast grants Killing Machine with an Obliteration in addition to Frost Strike. That's a really nice change because they're noticing, okay, you're wasting Rhyme procs there because you could easily overwrite 3 Rhyme procs, maybe 4 with the duration increase. That sucks. That never feels good. So we'll change that. That's a really nice change because Howling Blast does do more damage than Frost Strike. It really does. It does a ton of damage. So that's a nice change. I really like that. I like how they kind of noticed that was definitely a problem within the spec for Obliteration back in the day. Next up, we have the changes to the legendaries and certain little talents that were really just favoring the Breath of Sindragosa build. And the first one is, of course, and they even talked about this, they said that we really want to fix Frost's flood of resources, and that was, of course, the biggest problem with Hungry and Rune Weapon, but it was also a big problem with Murderous Efficiency and Horn of Winter. They're incredibly strong talents. They give you a ton of resources, so what they're doing is they're nerfing those slightly. Horn of Winter cooldown is increased to 45 seconds over 30. Okay, that's all right. That's what it was previously, so it's not like a big increase, but it's definitely going to knock it down a couple pegs, and Murderous Efficiency is going back down to 50. It was at 65, but even before it got buffed to 65, it was at 50. So it went from 50 to 65 to 50. And 50 is kind of a nice point. 65 was a little bit too strong. It was giving more resources than not. 2/3 of the time as opposed to half the time is very strong. So Koltira's Newfound Will, the Belt Legendary, which used to just give you a 15% chance for your Obliterate to refund 2 runes. Now it generates 1 rune, and it causes your Obliterate to deal 10% extra damage. In my mind, that's insane. That's insane because for the Obliteration build, your Obliterate is usually your top DPS, top damage on your meters. It's always fucking number 1. It's insane. It does so much damage because you're getting guaranteed killing machines for the first 10 seconds. You're getting 5 killing machines in the first 10 seconds. It's insane. It does so much damage, especially with Lust. It's just nutty. So having Obliterate deal an extra 10% damage is fucking crazy. Really, it is. So this is definitely making way for the Belt chest combination in my mind. That's definitely going to be a really strong build for this coming up. And of course, also Wrist Belt. We're definitely going to see some nice combos with this. This is definitely a really strong legendary coming in because that extra 10% damage, you'll definitely see if you try out Frost in 7.3. Try it out on the PTR right now. This legendary is nuts. And next up, we have the talents that were shifted around. They also got changed slightly. So, of course, Runic Attenuation, now going back to the talent tree, is a level 56 talent. Murderous Efficiency is a level 57. And Frozen Pulse is a level 90. So what they're doing with that is they're changing around, not only changing around some of those talents, but they're buffing and nerfing them. So the first one is, of course, Frozen Pulse, now being a 90 talent. It is very strong. So what they're doing is they're nerfing the damage by 39%. That is huge. Frozen Pulse is personally, to me, one of my favorite talents. I love how it forces you to play on low amounts of runes in order to put out a lot of damage. It really allows for a different playstyle with Frost where you're always kind of starved on runes because you just want to make sure you have as little runes as possible. You'll always want to be below 2. It's a really nice playstyle. Nerfing the damage kind of sucks, but obviously they felt that it was needed. And also for some of the talents that are going to be competing with Runic Attenuation now, which is Icy Talons and Shattering Strikes, they're buffing those talents. Icy Talons bonus is now 15% per stack, of course, stacking up to 3 times. It was 10%, and Shattering Strikes bonus is now 60% as opposed to 40%, so it still consumes the Razor Ice stacks, but it does 60% extra damage as opposed to 40%. And that is, of course, to compete with Runic Attenuation, which is still the same way it was, but it's still going to be incredibly strong. It's really a very powerful talent. So Murderous Efficiency, which is now a level 57 talent, is competing with, of course, Freezing Fog and Horn of Winter. Freezing Fog was reduced slightly to 20% as opposed to 30%. So all the talents on that tier have basically taken a huge nerf, which is well needed because they were one of the strongest talent tiers on Frost DK's talent tree, so it is a well-needed nerf, definitely is, not even going to argue on that. And last but not least, the level 75 talent row, which is the utility talent row, is getting a couple changes. Volatile Shielding, which was fucking trash before, I mean, the damage was just not even existent. It was really crap, has now been completely changed, and it now causes AMS to generate 100% additional runic power, but it no longer deals damage. So what they're doing there is they're taking away it deals as much damage as it absorbed, which was basically non-existent, like at max 500k damage, and instead it generates a shit ton more runic power. It's going to be one of the go-to talents now. That's nuts. That's insane. I fucking love that. And also, White Walker is now being replaced with Inerexible Assault. So what that does is every 1 second spent in combat with no enemy within 8 yards, you gain a stack of Inerexible Assault, which each stack causes your next auto attack to deal additional damage. And what we saw in PTR was about 100k damage per stack, which is huge. So if you're away from the boss for a period like on Goroth, where you have to hide behind a pillar, or if you have to, I don't know, what another, the darkness phase on Kill Jaden when you're away for a little bit, or you have to get off the boss for a period, it was very punishing before as Frost, because you would draw breath or you would have to hard cast Howling Blast. Well, now with this talent, if you know you're on a boss fight where you're going to be away from the boss for a period, you run this talent, and that downtime is not as hurtful as it used to be. You're constantly still doing damage. Technically, you're doing 100k DPS off the boss. It's pretty nuts, actually. It really is if you think about it. It's still a huge damage increase, even if you're off the boss, which I kind of like. I like how they're saying, okay, Frost's most punishing thing was being off the boss. With Unholy, you still have your Virulent Plague ticking, and your pets are still doing, well, your Sludge Belch are still doing damage. And with Clawing Shadows, you can still DPS the boss. You know, it's not that bad for Unholy DKs, but for Frost, it was fucking awful to be off the boss for a period, especially with Breath of Cindergosa. So this is definitely going to get rid of some of that pain of being off the boss if you know you will be. So it's a really cool talent. I'm going to play around with it. I have been on the PTR, but I'm excited to play with it on live. So that concludes the video. I hope you guys enjoyed and found this a little bit informational. I hope you guys are excited for 7.3, and I have a lot of videos coming up in the next week, a lot of guides coming out for both Frost and Unholy. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like the video and subscribe with notifications on, and I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.